Welcome back to another edition of Political Breakfast, heard on WABE. I'm Lisa Rayam, and we are here. The regulars are here. We've got strategist Tharon Johnson and Brian Robinson. Welcome back. We've taken a couple of weeks off just for various reasons. We've all been busy, and that's good news, but good to see you both. Hello, hello.
Good to be with you. I actually had a little trip to Israel in the meantime after the primary runoff. I needed to get away, so I went to a war zone where it was less stressful than the primary was. Israel was beautiful. Got to see the border with Gaza, where much of the October 7th massacre took place, and then the border of Lebanon, looking over there, kind of getting a view of the mountains around it. They give Hezbollah a military advantage, and Israel had to push them back a little bit, but also got to see some of the Christian holy sites, got to go to the Sea of Galilee, to the Mount of Beatitudes, to the spot where St. Peter lived and where Jesus would have told them to move the nets from one side of the boat to the other. So for a person of Christian faith, it's always...
Listen to you taking us to church. Take us to church.
Yeah, I know, right?
Take us to church. Yeah.
I'll end with this. There's also... around the old city in Jerusalem, they have excavated the old pilgrimage road for the first time in forever. And so you're walking up these steps from kind of this valley up to the old city. And it's the path that people in Jesus's time, and probably Jesus himself, would have walked when going up to the temple. So I've missed y'all, and I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, that's a beautiful region and some phenomenal history there. Tharon, you've been doing your thing, that certainly pays your bills, but you've also been around the world with FIFA.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely been working hard. And B-Rob, thank you so much for sharing all those details about your amazing trip. And more importantly, thank you for the wonderful tribute that you did to our friend Martha Zoller, who unfortunately passed away. That's one of the reasons why we also were not on the podcast now.
That's right.
Is that we all had to go to her funeral last week, and then of course we took the week off. But yeah, I am actually heading out to Seattle to watch the Team USA in their third match, Sweet 16. So it's the knockout round. So I'm very happy with that, and also to shout out to the city of Atlanta really quickly. I got a chance to go to the first match with Cape Verde in Spain, which was a tie. But I mean, the fan fest, the level of security around MARTA stations, on the streets, people having fun. Shout out to South Downtown, all the restaurants.
Doing a good job, right? The city's doing a good job.
Great job by the city.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
I echo that. Atlanta has shown, and I'll tell you, man, people around the world are going to be talking about Mercedes Benz Stadium, or Atlanta Stadium as it is for these few weeks. But I think people have been mesmerized by what a gem that is, and I am super jealous.
Yeah, and I'm a new soccer fan. I really didn't pay attention to soccer until now, and I'm even enjoying watching all these matches. And I too applaud Atlanta. I think we've done a fabulous job in hosting these countries. We've worked for a long time to be on the global stage, and I think we can finally say we are here, especially when it comes to diversity. Don't you think?
Well, we're certainly getting numbers in that suggest that's true. We have latest census estimates that are going to have profound political implications for the state. I think, it will be, demography is destiny will come into play here. But the latest numbers show that the state's grown by 500,000 people. And of those, all of them are minorities. We've had a net loss of non-Latino white people in the state. State's still growing. And that growth is really centered around the donut around Atlanta. Henry County has seen a boom in Black population. Gwinnett County, a boom in Asian immigration, as has Forsyth County. 90% of the growth in Forsyth County, which used to be the all-white county in the state, huge Asian boom there. And then, of course, we're seeing significant Latino migration into the state. Lots in Dalton, in Gainesville, where there's already an established Latino community, where the poultry industry and the carpet industry have certainly driven the employment in those communities. But the Latino migration to the state has been much more spread out, much less, narrowly focused as the Asian community's migration has been. So we're seeing significant changes, and Tharon can talk to this and how Democrats see it, but I can tell you, it's not without reason that Rick Jackson started off his general election campaign at a Mexican restaurant in Doraville with a Mexican-American, John King, our insurance commissioner. And then the second event was at a black barbershop in College Park, because we're now a majority minority state. And we cannot live by the old rules where Republicans run up the margins with white voters, and then all minority voters go to the Democrats. And it's just a matter of how many white voters can Democrats get. That's no longer the case. We used to have the 30-30 rule that, Democrats to win had to get 30% of the white vote, and at least 30% of the electorate had to be black. That's probably not true anymore, because the electorate is diversifying. And if Republicans are going to win in Georgia, including in 2026, like the change has happened, right? They've got to win some minority votes, or you can't win in Georgia.
Yeah, Tharon, the numbers, 40% of the new residents between 2020 and 2025 are Hispanic. Another 33% are Black, 20% are Asian. What do you think in terms of political implications this will have for Democrats specifically?
One thing has been consistent since I've been on this show with Brian. We started off with Morning Edition, and then it sort of evolved into Political Breakfast. And he's heard me talk about now for over a decade, Lisa, about demographic shifts in Georgia and how that benefits Democrats. We saw it in 2020, but we thought it was going to happen in 2016. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to really see the outcome of that. And also in 2014, when we saw like some of these trends starting to come to fruition. But now going into 2026 and 2028, I think the demographic shift benefits Democrats, and let me tell you why. Number one, we have been a big supporter of the Latino community now for a very, very long time. With that 40% growth of Latino votes between the years of 2020 and 2025, we can't fool ourselves, though, because the Republicans have made a concerted effort to try to court more Latino voters. And a lot of people will tell you some of the Cuban voters, they sort of tend to be a little bit more conservative. But when you get to the Puerto Rican and other Latino voters, and they are people who the Democratic Party has done a pretty good job of facilitating their support. And then the 33% African American, I mean, look, that is a challenge, but also an opportunity. The challenge is that when they move here, we got to make sure they re-register. We got to make sure they actually register here to vote. I can't tell you how many people I see of all races that say, well, I still vote back home, or I still want to keep my registration there. But that number is a good sign for Democrats. But let's not also fool ourselves, because Republicans are particularly focusing on Black men. Now, the Asian community, Lisa, that is where I think the battleground is. A lot of them are migrating. B-Rob did a good job talking about counties like Forsyth County. And they also in middle Georgia and in southeast Georgia with the recent, business development there around the state. And so I think that we got to continue to get the Black vote, get our 90+%, hold on to our Hispanic voters and Latino voters, and be very specific to them about why we are the party that has been fighting for them, not just recently, but for decades. And I think that with the Asian, Pacific Islander, and other voters, we've got to make sure that we get them to buy into the candidates, not necessarily the party, but buy into the actual candidates that are running on the Democratic side.
Now, I was going to follow up on that, on Tharon's thoughts there. But Republicans have got to make a concerted effort, and you're already seeing it happen. I mentioned what Rick Jackson has done in his campaign. But the House Republican Caucus has all of these minority outreach personnel on staff now. So all the political staff paid for by donations that are going out around the state, and they're targeting Black voters, Asian American voters, Latino voters, and trying to build that coalition.
As they should, yeah, absolutely.
As they absolutely must. And of course, one thing we're seeing here is as new people come into the country, they don't always bring with them a partisan ideology or partisan affiliation. And Republicans have got to be able to get new immigrants and make sure that they see Republicans as a party that represents their values and their interests. And the parties are continuing to evolve. I mean, the Democrats might say, well, Trump doesn't seem to be very pro-immigrant because he's really shut down a lot of immigration into the country. At the same time, a lot of people came here to escape socialism, and in pursuit of capitalism, they're entrepreneurs. They want to come here and start businesses. They want the American dream for their children. I think Republicans have a really strong argument to make for them. Not necessarily posting up on Georgia Democrats, who probably are a little to the right of the national party. But if you look at what the Democrat Party is becoming in places like New York, where they are firmly embracing socialism and some pretty far out there social views, I think some of these more conservative groups moving to Georgia, who are culturally conservative, who are family oriented, who are entrepreneurial, Republicans have got to be able to make an argument for why they belong with us. If they don't, Democrats are going to run this state soon, and they're going to run it forever.
Talk about what's going on in the political circles now. We haven't talked about that for some time. And certainly what we just talked about, the census, certainly will have impact come November. Bottoms and Ossoff, though, Tharon, we haven't spoken since they stumped in Savannah and crashed the scene, so to speak. What has the momentum been like since then?
It's unity. And we've had an opportunity to have a longer period of time to be unified than the Republicans because Keisha Lance Bottoms pulled off a major victory by defeating all her opponents without a runoff. And so she took those 30 days or so to, one, take a deep breath, two, sort of go and increase the actual apparatus of her campaign. I said on this podcast last time that DGA was on the ground and that they were here, and I was very specific. I didn't know any details, but I just know that how important this race is to them. So now she's fully staffing up, and she's getting her apparatus in place. Meanwhile,
let's say there, and that's Democrat Governors Association for people who aren't, who aren't politicos.
Yeah. And then, with Jon Ossoff, Lisa, he's now had 5.5 years or so to be prepared for this moment. So his team, while he's been governing the official side, but his campaign side has been readily active no matter who the nominee was going to be. So I think this unity appearance is mutually beneficial for both candidates. Let's start with Jon Ossoff. Jon Ossoff has a lot of money. He's got a lot of appeal. Polling is showing that he is right where he wants to be. He's very popular with the base. He's doing extremely well with independents, and even some moderate Republicans, I believe, are appealing to him with a message. But he also needs to make sure that he has the number one voting bloc in the Democratic Party, and is Black women, to not just turn out, but they need to turn out in huge numbers for him. And then Keisha Lance Bottoms brings that to the table. As far as Keisha, she's now partnering with a Democrat, a white Jewish male, who also helps her broaden her Democratic coalition, but also makes her more appealing to the moderate independent sort of coalition of this party. And I think she also needs for him to show her on a national stage, because this is a national U.S. Senate race, but this governor's race now is a national race because it has so many historical opportunities there if she were to be victorious. And so I think two of them are basically realizing, I need you, you need me, but it needs to be authentic. It needs to continue to be sustainable. And I think the fact that they were in Savannah and the messaging, while it was a little different, both went on the attack of their opponents, but just the visual, the optics shows that, as we just talked about the census data, and as much as my boy B-Rob likes to talk about all this outreach that the Republican Party needs to do, and I agree with him, it's just not reflective of the ticket. You got pretty much all white men and two Latinos. You have a Latino man and a Latino woman. The rest of the ticket are white men. Whereas on the Democratic side, while we don't have a white woman on the ticket nor a Black man, we have a huge amount of sisters with an A on the ticket. And we got, with some, white males as well. So much more diversity, much more replica of how the state is looking and trending. And I think that the optics wise, if you see Mike Collins and Rick Jackson versus Jon Ossoff and Keisha Lance Bottoms, just visual alone shows you more youth, more about the future, and more diversity. So I think you'll continue to see them appearing across the state together.
How much will money play a role moving forward? We know Keisha Lance Bottoms is running against billionaire healthcare CEO Rick Jackson. And Brian, I just read somewhere he spent, $108 million of his own money on his campaign for governor. Money talks in most circumstances. Is that what he's banking on in this election cycle?
Yes, and that the story there about the Rick Jackson spending shows, I keep hearing about how much money I'm making on this campaign. I keep hearing about it when I'm out and about, and so now it's in the print. It's not all that much. So
you're the 0.8 million part of it. Is that what you're making?
I haven't
very
seen the
fair.
number, B-Rob, but you
Yeah,
can tell
that's
me
in
off
that
air.
story.
Yeah,
I kind of got plucked out of it. I mean, there's this huge disclosure list, and they somehow Brian Robinson, what he makes, needed to be in the news for some reason. Uh, Look, Rick Jackson is going to be able to spend whatever he needs to spend to make this win happen, and he said that I will spend what it takes. But I will tell you, there's something to be said about fundraising. There's something to be said about your base and your supporters putting skin in the game and anteing up with their dollars. And Rick Jackson is going to have a healthy and hefty fundraising operation in a way that he simply did not in the primary. He went out there and talked to Georgians and met with real voters. He was not out there just talking to the donor class, which is an unfortunate reality for many candidates who've just got to feed the beast. You just got to have the money coming in. And so you are spending time with the donor class or on the phone with the donor class. Rick Jackson just wrote a check and then went out and met with real people. And I think it's hugely important. It was a massive advantage in several ways, but narrowly, one of those advantages is you get a really broader look into what voters are thinking and voting on when you're out with people who work in landscaping, or they're plumbers, or they are public school teachers or firefighters. Those are the people that Rick Jackson was seeing, and they're going to come to him with much different thoughts about what matters and doesn't than the donor class is. And so Rick Jackson was with those real people everywhere he went in the state, and that was significant. But there are going to be fundraisers going into the general election, and I think that's good. The Republicans, independents, people who want to see him elected need to have skin in the game, need to donate. And because if you give money, if you give $25, Tharon knows this, you're going to go vote. Because all of a sudden you're invested.
You're obligated. You're invested and obligated.
You're going to go. It is not something that you're going to forget to go do. If you give $25, you're going to go. And if you give $16,000, well, I mean, you're going to make sure your family goes probably. So those things matter greatly. And on this, Jon Ossoff's going to have plenty of money. I mean, he's already raised a lot. It's much harder for him than for Rick Jackson and Keisha Lance Bottoms because he deals with very low federal thresholds for donor maximums. But he's going to have a lot of outside spending. There is no scenario where there is less than $200 million spent to get Jon Ossoff reelected. Some of that's going to be raised by him. A lot of it isn't. A lot of it's going to come from other groups. And that's going to benefit Keisha Lance Bottoms because the vast majority of folks who show up to vote for Jon Ossoff are going to vote for Keisha too. Rick Jackson's got to make sure that a significant number of those people who are showing up to vote for Ossoff also vote for him. And so that's going to be, you're probably going to see that strategy play out. That's just sort of the reality of it. Not to say Mike Collins can't win, not at all, but the Jackson folks have got to go into it thinking this is going to be super tight, and we're going to need some split ticket voters to make this happen. And Keisha Lance Bottoms is going to have a hard time competing with the fundraising dollar for dollar with Rick Jackson. And in fact, she won't compete with Rick Jackson. But she's going to benefit somewhat from the Ossoff spending.
So, well, Tharon, let's get you in on this. Like I said, money talks. Is this bothersome to Democrats that he could shell out $108 million so easily?
Lisa, what's interesting here is that you're right. The numbers just came out of how much money Rick Jackson actually spent from his bank account on his own race, but 83 million of that 108 million was spent on network and cable television. And so he's going to have to double that, or maybe even triple it of his own. And so, Keisha Lance Bottoms is not a billionaire. She's not going to be able to put that much money, not even close to it, of her own money. But it's going to be a combination of her being very disciplined. What she's doing now is raising money. She's doing fundraisers. She's being very laser-like focused on asking people for money. But again, she's going to need some outside help. And then you're also going to have the coordinated campaign. You're going to have the Democratic Party of Georgia. You're going to have the Democratic National Committee. And you're going to have the Democratic Governors Association that are going to chip in. And so what I think will happen here is that Jon Ossoff understands that there's got to be a confluence between media, but also having that momentum on the ground. And he has an operation. And he's been out there. But Keisha Lance Bottoms' apparatus actually just did it. So they got to amplify that. And another thing that's really interesting here, is we don't talk a lot about this, but Mike Collins didn't raise a lot of money either. So don't want to put words in Rick Jackson's mouth, and he's got B-Rob on here to talk about it. But I'm thinking that if I'm Rick Jackson right now, I'm like, all right, bro, like I just put in 83 million, and so I don't know how much you raised, but what's that Republican senatorial congressional campaign gonna do for you? Because if you're Mike Collins right now, he did raise a little bit more than Keisha, but he's opposed to it. I mean, he's a sitting congressman. He's comes from money. I mean, I give all the reasons why he raised more money than Keisha. But Rick Jackson has got to be worried about this large load that he's got to carry from Mike Collins, whereas Ossoff is not as worried about carrying a quote unquote large load for Keisha because we knew whoever the nominee was going to be, he or she, in this case, she's going to have the money coming in. People want to win a southern state. People want to win Georgia. And so I think the money won't be a big problem. We're not going to spend more than Jackson and Collins. You just got to have enough to compete and stay on the offense. And I think that's why the coordination between the campaigns, being unified, standing up there together with all the outside money. And we haven't even talked about this, Lisa, but the PACs. Will there be another mysterious, third party independent expenditure that we still to this day don't know who was responsible for going after Burt Jones? Will that political organization reappear? And would it be one on the Democratic side that appears and goes after Rick Jackson and Mike Collins? And so B-Rob is right. There's going to be so much money spent on this race, but Democrats have got to definitely raise enough to stay competitive.
And plenty of time to do it. Before we wrap here, I want to hear from both of you. What does the average voter need to be watching for and listening for, leading up to the November election at this point? They don't think like strategists and they don't talk like strategists, but what should the average Georgian be focusing on right now? Brian, I'll begin with you.
Well, I can tell you what they are focusing on, and that's affordability. That is and remains the number one issue for Georgians. We've seen a significant rise in home values, which is great for people who own homes, not great for those trying to buy them for the first time. We've seen a significant raise over the last 6 years of groceries, gas, just across the board. It's gotten harder to pay your bills. And a candidate who can realistically and convincingly speak to it is going to have an advantage. And I think, Rick Jackson's, I can't speak for Keisha Lance Bottoms, but I would imagine Rick Jackson is going to talk about, I'm a businessman, and a business is a solution to a problem. And I've been really good at creating solutions to problems. It's made me a billionaire, and I'm going to bring a solution to your problem. And he talks actually with some specifics when it comes to the agriculture industry, when it comes to energy use. So Keisha Lance Bottoms going to have to do the same, and I'm sure she will. Democrats talk about Medicaid expansion.
She jumped out talking about bread and butter issues.
Absolutely, and you're going to see Rick Jackson doing the same. So I think, look, for me, this is my appeal to voters, and this really is more for people who think in political terms. If you think Georgia is going in the right direction, vote for Republicans. Even if you think America is not going in the right direction. If you came to Georgia because the business climate is strong and you want an opportunity, then vote for Republicans. And, don't come here having escaped the failed policies of blue states and then vote to enact blue state policies. So that's my appeal to the average voter is we're on the right path here in Georgia. Let's not mess it up.
All right, Tharon, take us out of here. Tell us what the average Georgian should be thinking about now in July ahead of the November election.
Well, Lisa, I know we were going to try to talk about this today, but I'm going to be respectful of time. We didn't talk about this most recent poll came out. And so to me, that's a perfect segue to sort of get into what I think voters care about. So there was a poll that came out that basically showed that Jon Ossoff was beating Mike Collins. He was at 56%, and Keisha Lance Bottoms was on top of Rick Jackson with her getting 52% of the vote. But what's interesting here is that the result showed that some ticket splitters, these people, as Brian called it, deciders, 11% of the Ossoff supporters crossed party lines to back Jackson for governor, and only 5% of the Collins supporters backed Keisha Lance Bottoms. Now, the question you got to ask yourself is, okay, who are these people who are saying I'm going to vote for Jon Ossoff, but then I'm going to vote for Rick Jackson? And I really want to know who are these people that are saying, hey, I'm going to vote for Mike Collins, and then I'm going to go vote for Keisha Lance Bottoms. I think a lot of them are people when you define them as far as race, because we know there are not a lot of Black Republican voters out there. They're just not as many, and there's a few Latino voters. But then these are also people who is Brian to say, hey, you need to just keep things the same. Are you very happy with the direction of the state? And I think that they're happy with the role that Jon Ossoff is playing from a federal level in the state. But for 5% of Collins voters saying that, hey, we'll go to Keisha Lance Bottoms, if Keisha Lance Bottoms can stay right there at like 5 or 6%, that's remarkable, right? Because I mean, if you're a Collins person, what do you really have in common with Keisha? Now, I can make an argument where I think some of these white Ossoff voters will say, okay, you know what, for whatever reason, it's just hard for them to support a black woman, Lisa. Just keep it real on this podcast. I mean, we've seen that majority of Republican voters don't tend to go and support a black Democratic governor, but Keisha is getting 5% of that vote. The thing that I think is going to be the most interesting about what people want right now is, what is your record? All right, Mike Collins has a record. Rick Jackson really doesn't have a voting record. Keisha Lance Bottoms has got a record. She clearly highlighted it in the Democratic primary. And guess what? Contrary to what everyone was out there saying about her, the voters said, you know what? That's our gal. That's who we're rolling with, right? And so then it becomes, okay, what is Jon Ossoff's record? And we know that he has a record of accomplishments, talking about how he's delivered for Georgia. And so I think the Georgia voters are going to say this. Don't talk to me about what you want to do or what you plan to do or what's in your plan. Talk about when you had a moment to do good for people in Georgia. How did you do it? And what was the direct impact? Ossoff is going to have a lot of positive things to say about that. Collins is going to have some things to say. Ray Jackson is going to talk about it from a economical private sector position because he's never been elected. He has no voting record. Keisha Lance Bottoms is going to have a lot to say about what she believes is going to poll well and that voters are going to resonate with. And of course, she's going to have to defend what the Republicans are going to say to her, particularly around public safety. But you can't say she raised taxes, right? You can't say that she didn't, like every other governor, I mean, every other mayor around the country, didn't have a spike in crime around COVID. And it becomes down to, who do you trust? Who is being more authentic? But you're also going to have to say, okay, are they living what they're selling? You know, when certain people on the Republican side say, I feel you, I know your pain, does Rick Jackson and Mike Collins really know the pain of what Georgia voters are going through right now? I tell you what I hear more than anything, Lisa, and I was out on the 4th of July, soccer matches and talking to folks. People are concerned about three things. Number one, jobs. You'll be amazed at how many people are working at Trader Joe's and Uber, and nothing wrong with those companies.
Yeah,
great companies.
Yeah, but
these are people who are having
right.
to, pick up second and third job. I mean,
Right.
these are
Absolutely.
people. The second thing they're concerned about are these high gas prices. This war in Iran that we think has ended or whatever's going on. Inflation is still high. The cost of groceries are just too high. Who can actually immediately impact the cost of living and affordability crisis? Not just talking about it, but actually done it. And then the last thing is got to be public safety. We can't sit up here and act like folks are not very concerned about public safety, making sure that they feel safe. We have seen that the police departments across the state, particularly in Atlanta, have done a good job of maintaining crime, lowering crime, but youth crime always spikes up during the summertime. And so public safety, making sure our kids get to school alive and return alive. And this is escalation of violence that we're seeing.
I think we have to worry about that in 2026.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the role
daunting.
of the state. And then the last thing, this is where the debate is going to be. And B-Rob and the Jackson campaign, I'm sure they're ready to have it. What are the pros and cons to expanding Medicaid? We know that most folks who are living it, like I'm taking care of an 81-year-old mother now. I know how important Medicaid is to her everyday life. But how do we make the economic argument that expanding Medicaid in this state, which polling has shown historically, maybe it's tightening a little bit later, that majority of people in Georgia believe that we should expand Medicaid. So the Republicans are going to have to answer why they oppose it, and the Democrats are going to have to push why they are actually for it. But is it going to immediately impact their lives? That's going to be the challenge. And I think that's what the messaging is going to be for the Democrats and Republicans going.
So what I'm hearing, you're telling folks, both of you, listen, read everything, listen to those candidates carefully, and look for who and who isn't authentic.
Authenticity is a big part of it, for sure. But I think this is going to be a very practical election. I don't think this is going to be an election one on wedge issues. I think it's going to be one on economic issues. And people want to be able to look toward 2027 with a view of who is going to make my financial situation better, who is going to expand job opportunities, and do something about the price of homes, which actually is a super awkward, tough conversation, because to increase the housing supply, which is the only way to bring down prices and make sure that Gen Z has an opportunity to get that foot on the wealth ladder and become homeowners, the only way to do it is to build more in places where people don't want to see change. And that's always tough. But I think we're going to have some really serious practical conversations about how we address these issues in Georgia. And, my hope is that Georgians appreciate that Republican governance here has worked. That's my hope as we go into this general election, because it's a really tough atmosphere. And my message to voters here, and we will repeat this over and over between here and October, is that Tharon used the word that I use a lot, the deciders. The deciders could be a really big group this year. And those are the people who, voted for Kemp and Warnock in 2022. That's one definition of them. Everybody's vote is going to count. This is going to be a really, really tight race. And the Republicans are going to run it like they are behind the entire time. There is no taking it for granted. There is no more, there's an R behind my name in a general election, ergo I have the advantage. That is not the case. In fact, I think in this election year, having the D behind your name is perhaps an advantage, and Republicans have to overcome that advantage. They have to be better. And that's a high bar to meet.
Yeah,
real quick, Lisa, the other thing, because we haven't been on this podcast in a while, but I'm going to tell you what folks are saying as well. When you put up a picture of Rick Jackson and Mike Collins standing next to each other, and they are pictured with Jon Ossoff and Keisha Lance Bottoms, we can't fool ourselves. It's going to be, do you want a younger leadership sort of leading the state, or do you want an older leadership leading the state? And older doesn't necessarily mean that voters really care about stability. Voters want change. And I think that when you see Mike Collins and Rick Jackson standing next to Jon Ossoff and Keisha Lance Bottoms, it's clear that there's a youthful energy on the Democratic side with experience, right? I mean, these two people are experienced, right? I can make an argument that while Rick Jackson is a very accomplished businessman, when it comes to government experience, he doesn't have any in an elected capacity. Mike Collins has got a record that Jon Ossoff is going to exploit. And so I think the other thing is that when they see these two youthful, energetic people standing next to more of a kind of can be perceived as an establishment Republican brand of the Republican Party, I think the excitement is going to tend to go towards Democrat. And lastly, we haven't talked about this either. Brian Kemp, if things were going so well, if things were so great in the state, right, why did some Republican voters go with the candidate that he did not support? He supported Burt Jones lost. He supported Derek Dooley. Derek Dooley lost.
Yeah, that's another show.
So,
yeah, that's
so my thing is, I still believe he has influence. I still believe he has influence. Let me be clear. But I would love to know from those voters, did you go against his candidate that he endorsed because you didn't like them, or do you want change? And if so, what is that change? I think that's where Democrats have got to go. If I was a Democratic strategist right now in either one of these campaigns, I would go talk to those voters who voted for Mike Collins and Rick Jackson in the Republican runoff and figure out, is there a possible way to talk to them and see if you can align with some of the issues they care about.
Wow. All right. Well, as always, a great perspective. Perspective that can change, because politics is politics. So thank you all for stopping in again, and let's do it again next week.
Hey, pull them through out there, Tharon. By the time this airs,
woe is Tharon. Tharon gets to go to the World Cup match again.
Don't do that to me, because Brian is not telling you. Brian went and had better seats than me in Atlanta.
I'm wearing my Team USA shirt for
I
you.
like that.
And shout out to everyone real quick who 60,000 runners, including myself and B-Rob, who went to the Atlanta. Yes, we did it.
Absolutely.
So shout out to the Atlanta Track Club,
question,
AJC.
did you guys finish?
I finished. Yeah.
We finished. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't. I didn't set any land speed records. I can assure you of that. I mean, I posted a photo. I posted a photo on Instagram of a guy with a cane who was ahead of me right toward the end of the race. So it gives you some idea of how fast or not fast I was going. But boy, it was hot. But Tharon's right. Atlanta Track Club does a great job. They really do a remarkable job with organization with 60,000 people.
And celebrates our wonderful city. All right, y'all have a great week, and we'll meet up again soon.
Bye, guys.